people, I think the pandemic helped that in a way. I know obviously it was negative in huge amounts, but I think it shone a light on the industry, saying there's this industry over here that needs help, and people going, oh, I didn't even know there was this industry over here.
Well, it certainly filtered things. It certainly sort of, let's say galvanized the conversation. It certainly gave us something to actually concentrate on, and we were able to identify the problems. It was a reset, in a manner of speaking.
So all I can think of now is you were due to go and sit on a yacht in Kingston, Jamaica, and you ended up with Liz in Kingston, London, writing about conference and exhibition.
You might say that's just as good. Yeah, no, that was, it was fun. Kingston was where I was from. I mean, that's one of the other things that sold it. I was born in Kingston. I grew up in Kingston. I left Kingston to go to the Middle East. And when I came back, I thought, well, Kingston, there you go. I'm a homeboy then. And it was, Kingston was, it was fine. MASH was a great place. And, people will know now that I left there after several years in November, just gone to join my new adventure with Davies Tanner, which I'm absolutely loving at the moment. It's been a real good change for me, and the exciting things that we've got going on surrounding the business of events has just been a real phenomenal piece of work so far. Because there's a clear objective of what we're trying to do. And I know we can talk about that, at some point later on. I don't mind.
Yeah, no.
But, it's encouraging because there's a clear objective. And I think that, we've got the right support in the right places. And essentially we're working to do something that the industry requires. It really is legacy of the pandemic and a real fix for the future.
Is that, do you think, what keeps you? Because it must be quite tough. We're in an industry that's project work, either event basis and it ends. Recruitment, the placement's filled. Journalism, the story's closed. You then have to start again, don't you? So it's continual keeping going. And that is quite tough for me even, to and do you think that's what's kept you in it? Because you seem to have sound like it has always been around events, even if you didn't know. Going into it's still events focused. Is that the energy buzz again for you? Is that sort of driving you, or what does sort of drive you to keep you in it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just one thing, I don't imagine, but look, for so many of us, the pandemic was, a real turning point. All of us were impacted without exception, and it impacted, all of us in different ways. And I'm not really one for self-centered stories and things like that. But for me personally, it was a real roller coaster. I found myself very much at the center of activity or communication by complete accident. I hadn't really, planned the pandemic, which gets me off the hook.
Hopefully.
But I hadn't foreseen that coming down the road. All I did was my job. At the end of the day, I was an industry press journalist. I know I wasn't the only journalist in the industry. There was obviously, several of us across different titles. And as far as I could see, I was just doing my job. But I was in a position where I was plugged into sort of every level, every different level. And that really sort of gave me a bit of a unique perspective, I guess. I was able to have conversations with all these different pockets of communities, which are quite different in what they set out to do, what their sort of MO is within the wider events industry mix. There's a lot sort of going on. Yeah. And I was able to sort of join those dots, whereas perhaps they might not have been so aware of what the other bits of the sector might be up against. So, how often would, exhibition organizers, for example, talk to conference and meetings venues? I mean, they those two bodies might not necessarily ever talk, so they might not understand the problems. That's perhaps an extreme example, but you sort of get that sort of picture. But lots of people were sort of perhaps not as informed as perhaps they thought. I guess that's probably a harsh way of putting it. Unwittingly didn't have the full sort of picture. So, of course, it was always obvious to me that there was, there was something to be had here, something to be done. that actually it was clear that there is a lot of good intentioned people. There are some really good ideas, but not much joining it together.
Yeah.
And I think now in my new position, I feel like I'm able to, without being a big light and laser show about it, sort of connect these different fragments of the industry together, engage with them to develop an overarching policy narrative, policy agenda, which is not sort of something we're doing off our own back. We obviously have the support of UK events. We're doing this, along with Visit Britain as well.
Yeah.
They obviously have a statutory obligation to advise the government. But we're doing that sort of hard work and resource. And that's the sort of energy that's what's energizing me, because I know that this is a tangible, positive outcome. And no one else is sort of able to sort of do that, I guess. So, yeah, I guess that's in a long-winded way, that sort of energizes me, knowing that we can actually make a bit of a difference here and actually say, when we get to a stage where someone again in government asks the industry, well, what do you want? What do you want? Well, we want more support. Well, what support do you want? Well, I don't know. That gets very tiring. And that was the problem in the pandemic. And, we need to be in a position where we have the answers, where we can say, we can point to a plan and point to a policy agenda and say, as a sector, this is what we can offer UK PLC. This is how we think we can get there. This is the support we need from you, the government, to help us and help you achieve these objectives. You have to look at it that way. You can't just say, oh, well, we need support. Well, what support do you want? We're going around in circles if we do that. For an industry that isn't structured, officially, and, we bang on about SIC codes and the whole rest of it all the time, that only tells half the story. We have to have a proper elevator pitch, in essence, one that we can evolve over time, because let's not kid ourselves here. We create a policy agenda before the next general election. An incoming government isn't going to turn around and say, oh, yeah, okay, fine. But that's still our plan that we can point towards, and with various government departments work towards achieving bits and pieces of it as we go along. And then as times change, as society changes, as rules change, then the plan gets adapted and it evolves. But we have to have that foundation.
Just explain for those that don't use the word SIC code. Just explain what a SIC code is for people.
A standardized industrial classification code is essentially, it describes the activities of your business. So when you set up a company at Companies House, you can choose up to 4 of these codes which outline your activities. So, you'll get all sorts. There's about 750. So in the UK, we call them SIC. They're actually part of the wider UN's ISIC system. So it sort of comes at the UN, and then various regions can take their own sort of not versions, but they can tweak bits and pieces. In the EU, in the US, they called it the NACE system. We call it SIC. And for the events industry, there are only 5 codes that relate to the events industry in any one way. And they're sort of fragmented around the list. They don't have an event section, so to speak. So activities of a conference organizer, an exhibition organizer are down there in, I think, admin support services or something like that. And event catering is in hospitality. I think AV hire or production, that's not the correct wording, is in something else. And then there's letting and venue conference operators, which is in real estate. We're everywhere. So when a government wants to see how big an industry is, it can go to the ONS, who are sort of in charge of overseeing these SIC codes. They go to the ONS and say, well, how big is X sector? Oh, well, according to the accounts filed against Companies House or the latest tax returns, it's this big.
Yeah.
Okay, well, where's the event sector? Well, there isn't one, because those codes are just lost in other sectors.
Exactly.
And of course, if you're a hotel, for example, a big chain hotel, and you rely on that conference business and the hiring of big conference suites and the whole rest of it, all that money coming into you, that when it gets filed and goes to accounts every year, that is hospitality.
Yeah.
That's how it's being registered. You can't take that out. You can't extract that. I mean, we can do manual research and have a guess at it. But as far as the government's concerned, that revenue is just hospitality, hotel business.